The British Business Bank is the UK's national economic development bank. We're there to support SMEs access finance where the market isn't providing it. So the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund and the Midlands Engine Investment Fund were to set up to address regional disparities in access to finance. Both NPIF and MEIF have provided over £50 million of funding to support small businesses across the North and the Midlands to help them innovate, to decarbonise, to transition to a low carbon economy and contribute to the government's net zero target.
Net zero refers to that balance between the amount of greenhouse gas produced and the amount removed from the atmosphere. In the region where we are, we have diverse, dynamic, innovative businesses. So everybody has to play their own part. The sectors, be it transport, manufacturing, heating, power generation, everybody has to play a part.
At the same time as we can reduce our carbon impact significantly by 2032 and towards the national target by 2050, we can actually create economic uplift and in excess of 100,000 green jobs. And that actually is where the prize is. We solve the environmental, but we do it not at a cost, but at a benefit economically.
In order to reach that net zero, we need to come together and collaborate. We need to see more regional investment for disruptive technologies like Nova, and we need to bridge the gap between the North and the South. We are one. If one fails, we all fail.
And I think there's an opportunity here from an investment perspective to get involved with a lot of good companies out there who are developing things with their eye on 2040, 2050 from a totally carbon neutral future.
Our technology is a continuous process where it's rapid, it's basically seconds and minutes, and it takes that woody and agricultural plant residues through a 3-stage process and creates biofuels, biopolymers and biochemicals. We replace fossil-based products.
Reduce the amount of energy the data centre needs to actually work, but also provide a working energy out of the data centres that can be used in other functions.
I think there's a tremendous role for small businesses and startups within our region to contribute to carbon neutrality. The way we can do that is by adopting and using green technology. Companies like ours are providing the solution.
I think things like switching from fossil fuels to clean energy, embracing new technologies, especially 5G, greener transport right across the region. These are some of the things that we can do.
Access to finance is critical for small businesses as they innovate and transition to a low carbon economy and contribute to the UK government's net zero targets. They need to have the funding to spend on research and development, to invest in new machinery, new equipment, but also to take on new staff and train them.
So we were able to secure £1.25 million from the Midlands Engine Investment Fund, and that enabled us to be able to open up opportunities for export. And we're sending our products to the United States, to Australia, onto the continental Europe.
TUCTEC, we're pleased to say, secured £100,000 finance from the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund. The finance allowed us to achieve the finalising of our product Atlas. And it's also allowed, as our plans progress, it has allowed us now to build a team ready for market.
I wouldn't be afraid of going out there and getting investment, because I think lenders are interested in all these new products. Certainly the consumer market is. And it's important that these products do actually get developed. These companies do actually get their services out there.
Small businesses are nimble. They're agile. They can make change very, very quickly. We certainly did. So the support that we give small businesses as much as we can to help reach that target is very, very critical. And people want to do this. Small businesses want to do this.
So I'm really proud that we're already moving on the net zero agenda, but I also recognise there's more that can be done. And I'm absolutely determined that NPIF and MEIF will play their part in delivering against those challenging targets that have been set for the UK.
Good morning and welcome everybody to today's webinar in partnership with the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund and the Midlands Engine Investment Fund. I'm Ben Ormsby and I am the Yorkshire editor of thebusinessdesk.com, and today it's my job to take you on a journey looking at low carbon champions and driving forward the green revolution, and most importantly the role which those two funds play within this journey. So I'm delighted to be joined by an expert panel who I will introduce you to shortly. But I think it's important to frame this session within what 2021 looks like. It feels like 2021 has been a year where the climate emergency has come back to the fore after we've dealt with the health issues of the last 12 months. And importantly, businesses of all shapes and sizes are having to take a look at their carbon footprint, whether that is by coming up with innovative technologies or by adapting their processes to help meet the ambitious targets that have been set for them by local authorities and government nationally. So this session is going to consider all of that and a little bit more, and thankfully I don't have to answer all those questions, and this will be the most you hear from me, fingers crossed, for the whole of that session. Before I do my introductions, there is a Q&A function through Zoom, so please feel free to ask your questions through that, and I will put that to the panel as we're going on. The session is also being recorded, but none of your screens are, just myself and the panelists, thankfully. Anyway, let's start with a quick introductory question. So can each of the panel introduce themselves? And also, as we said, the green revolution appears to be hitting its stride of late. What opportunities are you seeing for both the North and the Midlands to be playing a leading role in the growing sector? And I'm going to start by going to, Danny, because he's in the top of my screen.
Thanks very much. So, I'm Danny Jones. I'm the Managing Director at Off Grid Energy, and we are a manufacturer of small-scale energy storage systems that are used in temporary power and for supporting grid infrastructure for electric vehicles and a host of other applications. And we've seen a huge growth in potential for what we do, and have a very interesting story to report about how things are developing for us.
Fantastic. Next to you, Helen.
Hi, so I'm Helen Turner. I'm director of a partnership with 8 universities called Midlands Innovation, and I'm also a vice chair on the Midlands Engine Operations Board. One of the biggest projects that we've got as a collaboration between our 8 universities is a £180 million programme called the Energy Research Accelerator, which has seen capital investment create 23 new novel energy research and development facilities across the region. And I think the research space that we have in the Midlands has huge potential in addressing this agenda. But also the Midlands is really a home to 1 in 4 of the energy sector's jobs. It's developed the concept of energy innovation zones, which are designed to stimulate clean energy innovation to drive productivity, exports and growth. And unlike existing programmes, energy innovation zones will work not only to demonstrate new technology, but also to turn them into commercial propositions. But I'd also kind of flag that the Midlands is the logistics home of the country. 40%, it contributes 40% to the region's GVA, and we're what's called the freight golden triangle, with the highest amount of road freight in the UK. And so decarbonisation of road freight presents one of the biggest challenges for the transport industry, and so sustainably refueling the huge volume of goods that we have moving through our region presents a huge and unique infrastructure opportunity for us, I think, in addressing net zero too.
Fantastic. On to you, Mark. Oh, I can't seem to hear you, Mark. Let's see. Right. While we're trying to get Mark down, we'll go to Ken.
Thanks, Ben. I'm Ken Cooper. I'm Managing Director of Venture Solutions at British Business Bank. That means I've spent a long time looking at venture funds and gone actually through a couple of economic cycles doing that. And I was involved working with local enterprise partnerships and others in setting up both the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund and Midlands Engine Investment Fund. And I think you asked about opportunities. I mean, I think we quite often in venture we see innovation ahead of the market. So great ideas, but no market for them yet. And I think where we're seeing a really fantastic opportunity now is that there is a market. There's a huge market demand. You just need to look at things like, I was looking to buy an electric car. Almost can't do it because demand has been so great, and that's gone from a near zero base. And round our way there are floods of solar panels on people's roofs and things like that just 20 years ago would have been unheard of. So I think what we're seeing is the difference in this opportunity. We need the innovation. Absolutely, we need the innovation. But the difference we have here is that I think the market is there, and that's also being driven by sort of government policy.
Thank you very much. Right, we'll try Mark again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect.
Brilliant. Mark Buchanan from Extreme Low Energy. We're a low energy innovator and manufacturer based in the Northwest. Being in the North is pretty key for us because it's such a strong manufacturing and engineering base. It's only fitting kind of all, the North has played such a major role in all the previous industrial revolutions, and we're now entering a fourth industrial revolution for renewables and digital technology. So it's good to see the region leading the way and is facing such a huge opportunity with our historical kind of engineering and manufacturing backgrounds. So we deliver products that deliver low energy and low carbon infrastructures for housing and buildings. Recently, we've had a big influx of people looking for glamping pod power solutions, with the big push for staycations after the pandemic and unable to travel. So we're now powering leisure pods in the middle of fields without any grid supplies. So that's was a market we never saw coming. And it's just one of those that you kind of react to and you just jump with.
Fantastic. And then lastly to you, Simon.
Yeah, thanks. Morning. So my name is Simon Pringle. I'm the managing director of a management consultancy called Project Rome. We focus on helping organisations integrate their commercial strategy with strategies for sustainability. I'm also a LEP board member for Leeds City Region and a professor at Edinburgh Business School and an associate fellow at Chatham House, focusing on the Energy and Environment Programme. And in terms of the opportunities, they're just huge. And one of the things that the pandemic has given us, if we look for positives, is a demonstration that we can change business models, and we can change them really quickly, because we've pivoted lots and lots of business models over the last 16 months. So that whole piece about reticence in terms of changing business models to address a low zero carbon future I think has been sort of dissipated somewhat by our ability to change in response to the pandemic. And the North has got a huge opportunity because we've just got an amazing asset base. I mean, building on the comments from Ken and Mark and Danny and Helen before, we've got land. We've got land use choices to make in terms of what that means from an agricultural economy, from a rural economy, and of course from a carbon point of view. We've got a housing stock that needs to be retrofitted and can have a huge, play a huge contribution in terms of decarbonising the economy. And of course, we can leverage the strength of our manufacturing base, whether that's in the advanced manufacturing centres out of South Yorkshire, or looking towards the north at the high potential for the hydrogen economy. And all of that's going to help us redefine what a green economy actually looks like. It's not all about wind turbines and trees. There's going to be the green economy is going to be a big horizontal change and a really positive one too, I think.
Fantastic. Right. Well, I'm going to go back to you, Danny, now, actually, because I feel like you teased us with your introduction that you had some exciting things to tell us. So obviously the world's waking up to, I think everyone's said it in their intro, the new forms of power and the new opportunities that a green revolution's bringing. I guess, how are you seeing things go at Off-Grid Energy? And I know in the video at the start that we did have a slight tech issue with, but it came back in time. We saw you discussing the investment you'd got through the Midlands Engine Investment Fund. So how's that?
Absolutely. Happening? Yeah, absolutely. And just as Simon has said, energy is one of the, it seems like an awful mercenary way to look at things, but it's one of the big positives that's come out of what we've all endured in the last couple of years. And that's certainly been reflected in the experiences that we've had. It's accelerated or catapulted our the interest in our technology, and that's driven by a number of things. Obviously, sustainability is a big driver. We've been doing what we do for a very long time. We're often referred to as having had a 10-year overnight success. We've just been waiting for the time to be right for what we do to become the thing that everybody wants. And and that's exactly how it's happened. So there's a number of regulatory things, but obviously lots that's happening in the energy field on all levels. We work in temporary power. That's the use of using our technology, our battery technology, to displace the use of diesel to generate power for events and construction and in utility sector. So there's the sustainability agenda, particularly around infrastructure projects such as HS2, things that are happening within the electricity distribution network sector with Rio 2. All of that driving an agenda around cleaner ways of generating and more cost effective, because big part of what we do is that it's a win-win. We offer a technology that has a huge environmental dividend, but is actually also a savvy financial investment. And another factor that's driving that just in the temporary power world is the pending changes to red diesel taxation that's coming in April. So once people start paying forecourt prices for diesel in the construction world, then what we do will become even more interesting. So, and that's just one pillar of what we do. Electric vehicles, that's been touched on. And when we chatted yesterday, I promised that I would talk about the Midlands involvement with electric vehicles. So we've got some fantastic alignment with some well-known businesses in the Midlands in how we're recycling or repurposing electric vehicle batteries and reusing those to go into new applications, driving down carbon emissions in temporary power, but also in supporting grid infrastructure for the rollout of electric vehicles. Again, mentioned that getting hold of electric cars is tricky, but the development or evolution of charging networks is another factor that's got to keep pace with the growth in electric vehicles. So that's running very, very much in parallel with our evolution, and we're able to feed into the sustainability agenda, but also delivering solutions that are offering a much more cost-effective way of making enough power available in locations where there are clusters of vehicles to charge using energy storage. But just to dwell on that for a minute, one of the big things we see as a major issue with energy storage is making it work very, very hard for its living. We have applications, let's say, for example, with Oxford Bus Station, where we're capturing solar PV on the roof of the bus station in the daytime to charge batteries that are then being used to charge the buses, the electric tour buses at night in the bus station. But then we also have the ability to export that energy for flexible energy contracts with SSE onto their substation. So this sort of triangulated use cases and extracting every drop of flexibility helps us to maximize the commercial benefits of what we do, but also enables the evolution of smarter energy networks and helping to support and keep a pace with the desire to roll out electric vehicle networks. So that's just another sector that we work in. So and the common theme with all of these things is, of course, energy and how energy affects all of our lives, and a drive to a cleaner economy, but without introducing greater cost where that's not necessary. So energy is to your point, energy is an enormous element in what's happening in all walks of life at the moment. And the COVID situation really has helped to accelerate people's focus on those things. It's seen as a pathway to economic recovery, perhaps, I think, in many respects, and absolutely that's our experience, and supported by the funding that we've got, and I'm sure you can hear all loads of noise in the background. That's us reorganizing the workshop, and we've built a new mezzanine floor. We've got offices going in. Our staff has grown from 15 people in last September to 67 employees, mainly skilled jobs. So it's a huge story, and exporting. Over 50% of what we do is going to the United States, to South Africa, to Australia. So it's a really, really big story, and yes, energy is the big driver within all of that.
That's fantastic, and actually leads me nicely onto a question we've had from the audience. But I've got two actually. So the first one is Christina's asked, when is the increased cost for red diesel coming into force?
In April. In April.
There we go, Christina. And then another one from John is obviously, and you touched on it, Danny, that obviously you're creating jobs, but they're actually quite highly skilled jobs. So do you think that these market changes, and this is one for all the panel, do you think they're going to have an impact on demand for skills in the workforce? I guess, Helen, the work you're doing with the university, trying to shape the future skills of generations, how much is that playing into future plans for all of you? And I'll throw it to Helen first, sorry.
I think there's huge potential, for changing in skills. One of the things I was going to talk about later is around the need to decarbonise heat, and that picks up on what Simon mentioned around retrofit. Having low carbon heat in our homes, both the homes and the water, is really essential. In the Midlands, we've got lots of those household names, kind of Worcester, Bosch, Baxi, etc., that make the boilers that we're used to heating our homes. They all need to innovate, but we also need to take the skills side of things with us, so that we have the people that are able to safely install these new technologies, safely service them as they are operating in our homes. So I think, in all of these different areas, there's a huge amount that needs to be done, thinking about the skills that are needed to deploy these new technologies and maintain them as well.
Yeah, I mean, just building on that, Helen, I think it's a real imperative for us in the Midlands and the North to ensure. So we're going to go through a transition, and we've gone through economic transitions in the past, and some, one of those wasn't terribly just socially, and we're still seeing the social scar tissue through our communities from that. And I'm sure many participants on this call will live in those communities where that's still evident. So I think those of us that can create some degree of influence around reskilling different parts of the economy and ensuring that the transition that we're going to go through is a just transition, that's really key. And that's a skills agenda, because we shouldn't forget that, yes, we're going to experience a decarbonisation transition, but it's going to be running in parallel with a digitisation one as well. And so there are some huge upsides there, but the potential to leave people behind is also there too. So really focusing on the skills and making sure that whole transition is inclusive as possible is going to be key, and working out how to protect those parts of the economy that are currently high carbon or carbon intense, and ensure that those jobs are just not lost as part of this transition is going to be a real challenge for us to collectively address. But the upside is there's a huge amount of potential. It's not just new skills for young people entering the market. These are about repurposing existing skills and all bringing different people into the economy in a different sort of way. And that is industrial, it's rural, it's agricultural, it's services sector. And again, I think I alluded to it earlier on. The way in which we conceive of the green economy or the low carbon economy will have to change as well. It's not just about these sort of totemic or iconic green projects. It's about supply chains and service industries and distribution and all the rest of it too.
I guess, Mark, sort of following on from what Simon and Helen have said, how are you finding it in terms of getting the right people for the right jobs, and has it been a challenge? Are you doing anything different, or are you seeing actually just opportunities to, as Simon said, retrain people who might have been doing a different job before?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the problem with being at the forefront of things and innovating. So we're doing a lot with low voltage technology. Electricity that's been around for 100 years, but it's just not been used. So the skills just aren't out there. So we're having to retrain people. And I'd say, if you zip forward 10 years to 2030, there's got to be a huge proportion of our workforce that will be reskilled and retrained by that time. Heating engineers, plumbing, electricians, they're all trades that will change significantly through this kind of transformation that we will go through. So we have struggled. It is always one issue with new technology, trying to get that skills base and trying to get, especially when you're scaling up and you're trying to bring people in and hit the ground running quickly, but those skills just aren't out there. So we're working with a few universities. We're working really close with University of Nottingham on a few projects and Lancaster, and bringing people through. And we've got master students that have done work for us, and PhDs, and people that kind of, I guess that's what the other side of it, because it's new and it's innovative and it's interesting. We have no issue attracting people. It's so we can get people in. We've just got to kind of go through that period of getting them up to speed and skilled up. So it's getting better. There's more companies stepping into the green area. So there's more companies doing things with low energy, low carbon, battery technology, low voltage. So there is that resource pool is getting bigger all the time. So it's kind of go forward, a number of years, and we won't be talking about skills issues. We'll be just talking about, mainstream markets and kind of rollouts and maintenance programs.
That's fantastic. I'm going to go do two final quick questions that I can combine into one. I think it's on skills because it's a topic that everyone is always really interested in. Isabel's asked, how is the current provision responding? And I think you sort of answered that, Mark. You're working with higher education institutions to address that and to support the business economy. But Neil's also asked, how can colleges and teachers and of course parents perhaps open their eyes to the new world of the green revolution of jobs? We've seen plenty of talk about the amount of jobs that are going to be created. I can't quite now remember the figure that DRAC put out a month ago, but it was in the 50,000 jobs being brought about just through carbon capture and bioenergy in a sense. So it's how has anyone got any tips for how we can bring colleges, teachers and parents along the journey with us? Simon.
Yeah. So just a really quick one. So and to declare an interest, I'm a trustee of a not-for-profit called Solutions to the Planet, which is an innovation and STEM skills program for younger people, so school-age people. And what we've learned from that is the power of inspiration and role modeling that can happen in terms of bringing younger people, students, into contact with organisations like many of those on this call that are actually driving innovation and showing that there is a future which can be created, and using that to inspire them to take a path that includes, if it's for them, that includes some of the STEM skill options, because it's a bit of a challenge to bring enough students through the university system from an engineering point of view, from maths point of view, whatever. And if they're not making those choices earlier on in their educational career, then it's really going to be very hard for Mark and Helen and Danny to hire them later, right? Because they're not emerging out of the university system. And so creating that inspiration early on and demonstrating that there is a real vision here that we're working towards, which is that transforming our economy to a green economy doesn't mean losing things, it means gaining things. It means gaining a better quality of life, it means gaining cleaner air, it means gaining a more sort of resilient, biodiverse landscape in which to live. And that's the sort of passion that can be created in young minds and really inspire them to take choices that allow these guys to hire them later. That's what I would suggest.
That sounds good. Ken, sorry, go.
Sorry. I was going to try and take your role for a second, because I was wondering, as a parent who's seen my children go off and do the university thing and the jobs thing, to what extent are there transferable skills that we're talking about people learning? I mean, Mark, if somebody you've trained, could they go and work in a similar industry? Because I think that's one of the things that makes skills attractive, if you can put them to a sort of multiple use. So I don't know the answer to that, so I've switched to asking instead.
I've got a brilliant answer to that, Ken, and I've got a real life experience. So my son, who's kind of worked with me, so I've been doing ELE for the last kind of 7 years. So he's grown up as a young teenager, helping me. We used to build battery packs and things at home in the garage. So he's grown up around me. He's seen us do all the renewable projects. He's come out and installed. So he's grown up and got a grounding in the technology. He's a real engineer. He's like me. So he went to engineering college for the last 2 years. And he got into constant debates with his instructors around renewables because they didn't believe in it. They were teaching the next generation engineering skills, and they didn't see the merits or the benefits of renewables, to which he has grown up around it. He understands it, he gets it, and he'd argue the case, and he'd actually win the arguments and have the rest of the class on his side. And yet you've got old school kind of teaching methods and teaching kind of criteria and course methodologies that need upgrading. That we need to be teaching people about these new technologies. And 2 years in an engineering college, and he didn't touch on kind of the things that we do. It's quite disappointing. So I'd say the big thing, to answer the question from the audience there, was we need to be looking at curriculum and how we actually bring these new technologies into the mix. Growing up as an engineer, I was always seen as a geek, and no one wanted to be kind of get into engineering. They wanted the sexy jobs. Elon Musk's done a wonderful job for engineers and putting everyone on the market. And Tony Stark from the Iron Man films. People look up to these kind of innovators and inventors now. And we need to get that sort of passion into the schools and into the courses and into the teaching, so they can kind of play with energy, they can play with power technologies. And that's where the next innovations are going to come from. It's that generation. They're the ones that are going to come up with things that transform kind of the planet going forward. We've just got to inspire them and give them the right tools to be able to kind of, shape the future.
If I can chip in, could I? I think you're absolutely right, Mark. But I find that the youngsters do have the enthusiasm. They do want to, but they need that guidance. From the people that are teaching them. So you're absolutely right, and it's it's that old adage that change is the most difficult thing to manage, and we've certainly seen that. We've got people with plenty of enthusiasm for what we do, and if we've got the enthusiasm, we can sort of teach the skills, and I do think those skills will be transferable. I went to a presentation a few years ago from I would say a captain of industry who what he'd said was that years ago everybody wanted to go into financial services. Nowadays, energy is the thing to get into, and I think that's absolutely right. So I think the young generations have the enthusiasm and the vision, and they want to, and they're looking to us older people, let's say, if I can use that phrase, to show them the way, and it's incumbent on us to do that.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to move us away from skills just briefly, because we talked about innovation, and you sort of mentioned it. Those sexy style jobs and things. Innovation has always seemed like a sexy sector, because it's what's next. You're at the forefront of it. But I think some of the challenges might be those you talked about it, Simon. Not losing industries, but adapting the industries we have. So I wondered, how are the industries in perhaps the north and particularly within Leeds City region adapting? And then Ken, I'll come to you, and I want to know how the fund is working with perhaps those businesses that are becoming low carbon in a different way. So we'll go to you first, Simon, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, mate. It's that's a big, broad question. Of course, I think what businesses are beginning to recognise is that the way in which this whole transition is defined is dependent upon the context in which they're operating, and therefore which issues are most material to them. For some sectors, that's really obvious, particularly energy-intensive industries. That's really very clear. For others, it's a bit harder to pin down exactly what it is that's going to influence their ability to sort of create value, protect value, manage risk going forwards. But there are some patterns coming through. So some larger, more institutional organisations, Yorkshire Water is a great example of this, are adapting to really become an anchor for the region and to recognise that they can create an environmental impact, a social impact, but they can really only do that if they start working in partnerships. So the sort of the development of partnerships between different organisations, sometimes slightly unusual partnerships, is I think a strong and recurring theme, and something that we should anticipate seeing more of. There's also a recognition that that the whole ESG agenda, environment and social governance agenda, links very strongly to brand, to reputation, and to competitive advantage for some organisations. And making sure that the integrity of that brand promise is kept intact is another key theme that we're seeing in terms of the earlier stages of adaptation. And a lot of that looks like people reaching down into their own supply chains to make sure that their supply chains are managed in the same way that their operations are. And I think the SME community in its broadest sense, which of course underpins the economy in the North and the Midlands alike, I think perhaps the conversation has been rather too focused on the corporate level in the past, and now the SME community is beginning to understand that actually this is an agenda that could either be problematic if they don't adapt to it, but could also create some sorts of advantage and growth opportunities. So it's about understanding it on their own terms and then reaching out to people who can provide support, including the British Business Bank, of course, to look at the way in which they can sort of undergo a transition of their own on their own terms rather than more generically. So it's about sort of creating that definition that plays to their own sort of commercial self-interest as well as decarbonising their model. That's the key theme, I think.
That was a lovely segue, Simon, to the question to Ken of, You know, how are the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund and Midlands Engine Investment Fund looking at those businesses that are trying to decarbonise?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think firstly the plug. I mean, you'll have seen from the video at the start that something like £50 million of investment has gone in across the North and the Midlands to things that are very clearly sort of low carbon. There is, of course, a range, and it does range from people just sort of reducing their power usage to coming up with something really genuinely innovative and a new product. I think for innovation, you need that ability to take a risk. You need the idea, and then you need some money. And I think that last bit is rather obviously the bit where we hope to help. And across the Midlands Fund and the Northern Powerhouse Fund, we have a range of funding that's available. Each one of those has a website. MEIF.co.uk, NPIF.co.uk, and you'll be able to see the fund managers that are in there, and the funding available ranges from small loans, perhaps for a little bit of a pivot or to do some smaller project, through to larger equity investments for those riskier, perhaps newer, perhaps more innovative things. And I say perhaps because we've found actually that we also have larger loans, and we've found a lot of innovation has been funded through loans as well as through equity. So it's always worth talking to an advisor. It's also always worth having a look on our website. And as I say, £50 million without that ever being a particular target, because the funding is available across all sectors. But as I said right at the beginning, I think this is where the market's going. So I'd be really surprised if come time to launch the next rounds of those funds, we haven't found that the first rounds have contributed significantly more towards that agenda.
No, that's fantastic. And I guess a question both for Danny and Mark. How is the appetite from funders? Obviously, you've both been supported by either the Midlands Engine Investment Fund or Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund. How is the appetite for investment within your sectors? You've both sort of said it feels like the energy sector's, the zeitgeist at the moment. Everyone's into it. Are you finding that's reflected in investment interest? Danny, to you first.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's anybody that's been on the journey that we have, and I'm sure Mark's had the same experience of, working every hour there is, without 2 cents to rub together, and nobody wants to help, and you think that you're just out on your own in the wilderness, and can't understand why other people can't see what the future holds. A complete despair to a complete transformation, and I mean, honestly, on a daily basis, we're getting inquiries from some of the biggest companies in the world. Actually, it's phenomenal. So that has all happened since our engagement with the MEIF, and it has to have played a significant part in raising our profile and making people feel as though there's something worth having a look at. So yeah, our world has been transformed. The only sort of bitter taste left is that we'd have loved to have had some of that help a long time ago, and we'd be much further forwards. But that's life. So we couldn't be happier as far as that's concerned.
Fantastic. Same question then to you, Mark.
Yeah, no, I'd echo everything Danny was saying. Actually, there was a green shift already underway, before the pandemic. So kind of our businesses would have been experiencing similar sorts of things before the pandemic kicked in. And despite the uncertainty through the pandemic, that's carried on. And if anything, now the pandemic's brought it home to people, and there's been a rise in demand for self-sufficiency, and people realizing the finite nature of kind of the resources that we have. And people before, go back 3-4 years ago, and renewables was kind of in that nice to have bracket, and low energy, it's things people ticked boxes with to get through planning applications. now we've seen a real shift where kind of, especially local authorities and housing associations, they're grabbing the government's net zero challenge and looking to decarbonize their estate. But in doing so, also, we're delivering low energy, low carbon houses for tenants that are also tackling fuel poverty. So there's a carbon angle there which is driving it. There's targets set by the government, but ultimately we've got tenants in houses, high quality houses, but running for low cost and low energy. So it's a win-win. There is no negative to kind of any of it. Whereas before, when the developers or builders were running kind of the projects, it was just seen as a cost. Renewables was just a cost that they needed to bear to actually get through the project. Not all, there were some forward-thinking development projects out there, but we've seen a real shift now where customers are actually demanding this in the solutions. And that's why I agree with what Helen was saying earlier. The low carbon heat, low carbon hot water, low carbon kind of the whole initiative, the degasification of houses. It's going to see a massive shift in technologies, skills, and kind of will hit the industries that deliver anything into houses going forward, but in a good way. So yeah, it's been a very exciting time, but yeah, it feels like we're just at the start of something, which is really great.
If I just come in quickly there, just improving the quality of the homes that people are living in, then you get those knock-on benefits in terms of their health and well-being, and particularly when people are living in kind of cold, damp houses, you have all those sort of respiratory effects and things. So it really is a virtuous circle in terms of spending that money and getting the properties right, saving the money on energy, but improving people's lives.
Yeah, just adding to Helen's comment, I completely agree, Helen. And we tend to associate these sorts of retrofits with sort of winter type benefits, but of course, homes that are hard to keep warm in winter also tend to be hard to keep cool in summer. And as the climate changes, building in resilience so that people are able to avoid heat stress in the summer is an additional benefit, which has huge welfare implications, particularly for older citizens.
And in our sector around air quality, it feeds in the same, it's big headline stuff, and there are huge improvements for the quality of life. So there are all these other big dividends that we can see.
So I guess taking it in a slightly different angle, then obviously the government's made a lot of building back better, to use one bit of rhetoric, and building back greener, to use the other bit of rhetoric. So what opportunities do you see to sort of fuel the regional economies as we start to emerge from the shadow of COVID, thankfully with the vaccination rollout seeming to go well? So I guess perhaps you first, Helen, are you seeing opportunities for more supply chain growth within the UK, within sort of the sector? And do you think there needs to be any more support mechanism or support or interventions made centrally or regionally? That is partly a question from Isabel, by the way, not just me.
I mean, I think if I pick up think around it and looking at battery technologies, for example, and the electric vehicle market, where the Midlands really excels is in the infrastructure that's available to businesses to innovate. So, I mentioned the Energy Research Accelerator earlier, which saw 20 million investment going into the Warwick Manufacturing Group to create facilities that are accessible to business to really help them test products from their suppliers, trial innovative new battery chemistries, etc. To really help them develop and scale up their thinking and their novel research areas. But also, and building on that, we now have the UK Battery Industrialisation Centre, which was a further £130 million investment to really fill the gap between prototype and mass production in battery technologies. That's funded and supported by central government, but also the West Midlands Combined Authority, who are then not just looking at the kind of infrastructure that is needed to innovate in this area, but also thinking about the automotive skills needed to be able to ensure that businesses in the region have the right skills to to work with these future technologies. I think what's needed is a similar sort of scales of investment in other areas that would both level up the R&D investment gap that we have in the Midlands and the North. You know, the report by Richard Jones and Tom Thorpe that showed the missing 4 billion in terms of the kind of gap between the amount of investment made in R&D in the southeast and the rest of the country. I think they showed that the Midlands needed 1.4 billion a year to kind of close that gap. And I would argue that if we could invest in a similar way as we've done with batteries in technologies like around decarbonising heat, where there's a real potential both to kind of innovate and provide solutions for the kind of that will improve people's lives, but also support businesses in the region, and do that in a tandem with developing the skills that are needed by those kind of plumbers and heating engineers. You know, there's a real opportunity, I think.
Can I jump in on that?
Go for it.
Yeah. So I think, you know, in terms of that question, you know, where are the big levers? I mean, I mentioned before around, post-Brexit agricultural policy and the choices that gives us around the way in which we use our land and the way we incentivise agricultural business. That's a huge one, both for the North and for the Midlands, obviously. I think the other one really that we've touched on briefly is around carbon capture and storage, or carbon capture and usage, and the way that can catalyse a whole bunch of different innovation if we bring that through assertively, and not least of which, of course, would be the hydrogen economy, but there are other things as well. So really getting some strong political leadership and then crowding in investment around CCS and the technologies that will emerge once that's in place. That's a huge opportunity for us post-pandemic. So yeah.
I think sorry, Ben, if you don't mind, just quickly. So, you know, I mean, I think certainly from our perspective, another key area that can, could have disproportionate positive impact is, you know, just getting everything joined up. And we're building some, as I alluded to earlier, some great collaborations with some big organisations, particularly around the use of second life batteries and being able to demonstrate some really interesting business cases for that. But it's opening the eyes to other organisations as to what other opportunities there are, and to see beyond what their business has previously been, and suddenly realising that there's a much bigger world out there. So there's a huge opportunity to join these things together and to build these collaborations. So I think you know, a greater emphasis on supporting collaboration between innovators and other sectors of business and industry is also if you like, a lever that we can utilise to drive the pace of things.
Perfect, which actually leads me onto a very quick last question, because we are running out of time, which was going to be, you know, of all those things that we've talked about over the last 45 minutes, what are you most excited about? So really succinctly, we're going to do a quick round robin. What in 10 years' time, when hopefully, you know, there's some very significant carbon neutral targets being set by local authorities, is what are you most excited about having seen hopefully flourish? And we'll go with Mark first.
Well, that's an easy one, really. I just want to see kind of renewables flourish. There was a comment earlier about houses everywhere with solar panels, but actually you look around and there could be so many more roofs that could be generating their own power, and people being self-sufficient and kind of living an all electrified kind of low energy way. So that would in 10 years' time, I see that will be the case. Low energy heat, hot water, and kind of housing and buildings.
Fantastic. Ken, to you.
Yeah, well, obviously, more regional funding then, but actually, I'm quite excited about the prospect of better air quality and less travel. I think one of the things the pandemic's shown us is that local actually can be quite good. So I'd hope some of that as well.
Fantastic. Helen?
I think I mentioned it a few times, but I'm quite excited about the kind of challenge of decarbonising heat, and I hope in 10 years that we've all got low carbon heat solutions in our homes and we've got a thriving market.
Fantastic. Danny?
I think I'd say I'm most excited about what I don't know yet. You know, there's something out there that, particularly in the world of batteries and energy storage, there's something new lurking around the corner, and I don't know what that is, and I'm really excited about finding out what's over the next brow.
Well, when you do, make sure you let me know first.
Absolutely.
That's my only request. And then lastly to you, Simon.
Gosh, well, building on everything that everybody said, I would say I'm most excited about seeing this whole agenda flip into being a positive that people are excited about and are running towards, rather than resisting the change, that people are seeing it as gaining something. And we see that coming through not just the products that we buy and the way that we heat our homes or power our transportation, but also the way that land is used and the choices that we make around our food and our food security and the circular economy. And we'll have a much richer, more resilient, more biodiverse community in the North and the Midlands to live in, whilst we enjoy this this future that we can all aspire towards. So I'm really looking forward to it turning into a really strong, positive agenda that people are running towards rather than running away from.
Fantastic. So on that positive note, I think we shall draw it to a close. So I'd just like to thank you all for joining us. Thank my panelists, Danny, Helen, Ken, Mark and Simon, for giving their time and thoughts and expertise on this massive topic for such a short period of time. It's clear there is a lot to be hopeful for within the North and the Midlands, and that the funding is available to help make those decarbonisation journeys, well, a reality. So there will be a full write-up of this on thebusinessdesk.com in the coming days, along with a video made available afterwards. So thank you very much for joining me, and have a fantastic day.